the woman who guided the army through hostile territory for 3 months without losing a single man to ambush, received exactly nothing for her troubles. And Captain Morrison delivered the news with all the warmth of a January wind cutting through the Nebraska grasslands. Kate Ramsey stood in the quartermaster's office at Fort McPherson, her buckskin jacket still dusty from the trail, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a braid that hung past her shoulders, and listened to the officer explain why the vouchers she had been promised were worthless now that the campaign had concluded. She was 24 years old, lean and sun-bronzed from years of riding the plains, and she had inherited her father's ability to read the land like other people read newspapers. For 93 days, she had led columns of cavalry through Sioux and Cheyenne territory, finding water where the maps showed none, locating passes that cut days off their march, and twice warning them of war parties that would have caught them in killing grounds. The Army had promised her scout wages at $2 per day, plus bonuses for hazardous duty. That should have meant nearly $250, enough to save her family's struggling ranch outside North Platte. The authorization was never properly filed, Captain Morrison said, not quite meeting her eyes. He was a thin man with a mustache that seemed too large for his face, and he shuffled the papers on his desk as if the right arrangement might make them say something different. Without proper authorization from the regional command, I cannot disperse funds. You understand how these matters work, Miss Ramsey. There are procedures. Kate understood perfectly well. She understood that the Army had been happy enough to use her skills when they needed them, when their own scouts had refused to go into territory that had turned hot with raids after the disaster at the Little Bighorn the previous summer. This was October of 1877, and tensions remained high. She understood that her father, who had scouted for the Army for 20 years before a Cheyenne arrow had crippled his leg, had warned her that the government was generous with promises and stingy with payment. She understood that being a woman made it even easier for them to dismiss her claim. "I kept your men alive," she said quietly. Her voice did not shake, though fury burned behind her breastbone like swallowed coals. "I fulfilled every term of the agreement." "No one disputes your service," Morrison said, and the words sounded rehearsed. "But without proper documentation, my hands are tied. You might file an appeal with the Department of the Missouri, though I should warn you such processes typically take months, sometimes years." Kate looked at him for a long moment. She had grown up on the plains, had learned to ride before she could properly read, had been tracking game and reading weather signs since childhood. Her mother had died when Kate was 12, leaving her to help her father run their spread while also caring for her younger sister. She knew how to work hard. She knew how to endure, but she also knew when she was being robbed. "Thank you for your time, Captain," she said, and walked out before he could offer any more hollow sympathies. The October afternoon was cool and clear, as she crossed the parade ground toward the stables where she had left her mare. Fort McPherson sat along the Platte River, a cluster of wooden buildings and corrals that served as one of the Army's key outposts along the railroad line that now cut through Nebraska. North Platte itself lay about 20 miles west, and beyond that stretched the ranch land where her father waited, where her sister Mary helped tend their small herd, where the bank note would come due in 3 months unless Kate could find some way to pay it. She was saddling her mare, a tough little Mustang named Copper for her reddish coat, when she heard boots on the stable floor behind her. "Miss Ramsey." She turned to find a man standing in the aisle between the stalls. He was tall, with broad shoulders and the rangy build of someone who spent his life on horseback. He wore a dark blue shirt, worn denims, and a black hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. He looked to be in his late 20s, and there was something in the way he stood, relaxed but alert, that marked him as someone comfortable in his own skin. "That's right," she said, her tone wary. She did not know this man, and after the meeting with Morrison, she was in no mood for further disappointments. "I am sorry to intrude. My name is Nathan Rourke. I was at the sutler's store when you came out of the quartermaster's office, and I happened to overhear some soldiers talking about how the army had stiffed the woman scout, who brought them through the campaign without a scratch." He paused, and something that might have been anger flickered across his face. "I wanted to know if what they said was true. Did the army refuse to pay you?" Kate studied him. He had a strong jaw, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and a directness in his gaze that she appreciated. But she had learned caution over the years. "That is my business, Mr. Rourke. Please call me Nathan." He took a step closer, then seemed to think better of it and stopped. "And you are right, it is your business. But the thing is, I run a cattle outfit north of North Platte, up along the Dismal River. I have been looking for someone who knows the country, someone who can help me move a herd west to Wyoming before winter sets in proper. The trail bosses I talk to want wages I cannot quite afford, and the scouts who know the territory are all contracted elsewhere or unwilling to risk the season." "You want to hire me," Kate said. It was not a question. "I do. I heard about you from some of the soldiers over the past few weeks. They said you were the best tracker they had ever seen, that you could read sign in country where they could not tell which way was north, that you kept them out of trouble through skill instead of luck." Nathan pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. "I need someone like that. And I am prepared to pay well." "How well? What were you owed for the army work?" Kate hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding it. $250, near enough. Nathan did not blink. "I will pay you $500 to guide my herd to the railhead at Cheyenne. It is about 300 miles. Rough country once we leave the Platte Valley, and we need to move fast because snow could close the high passes any time after mid-November. Figure 3 weeks if we push hard, maybe 4 if the weather turns." Kate felt her breath catch. $500 would save the ranch, pay the note, and leave enough to buy the supplies they would need to get through winter. It was more money than she had ever had at one time. "Why so much?" she asked. "That is more than twice what you would pay a trail boss." "Because the army cheated you," Nathan said simply. "Because you earned that money and they decided their paperwork mattered more than their word. Because I can afford it, and because I need the best." He met her eyes. "And because it is the right thing to do." There was no calculation in his voice, no sense that he was trying to win her over with pretty words. He stated it as a simple fact, the way someone might observe that the sky was blue or that winter followed fall. Kate made her decision. "When do we leave?" 3 days. "I need to finish gathering supplies and hire on a few more drovers. The herd is already assembled, about 800 head. Can you be at my ranch by dawn on the 20th? "I can." She held out her hand, and after a moment Nathan took it. His grip was firm, his palm calloused from rope and reins. "You have yourself a scout, Mr. Rourke." "Nathan," he corrected, and for the first time he smiled. It changed his whole face, softening the hard edges and reaching his eyes. "I have a feeling we will be spending enough time together that formality will get tiresome." "Kate, then," she said, and found herself returning the smile despite everything that had happened that day. They discussed the details where his ranch lay, what route he hoped to take, what his concerns were about the weather and the terrain. Nathan proved to be knowledgeable about the land, asking intelligent questions and listening carefully to her answers. He had been ranching in Nebraska for 5 years. He told her, building his herd from an initial stake he had earned working as a drover on the big Kansas drives after the war. He was 28 years old, unmarried, and employed 4 regular ranch hands plus whatever temporary help he needed for drives and roundups. "I will have 6 drovers for this run," he said. "Good men, all of them. They will follow your lead on the trail." "They might not take kindly to a woman giving orders," Kate said. She had run into that problem before. "Then they can stay behind," Nathan said flatly. "You will be the scout. What you say about the route, the pace, the camps, that is law. I will make sure they understand that before we leave." Kate felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of tension she had been carrying since the meeting with Morrison. Here was a man who would pay her fairly, who valued her skills, who would back her authority. It felt almost too good to be true, and yet nothing in Nathan's demeanor suggested deception. They shook hands again before parting, and Kate rode out of Fort McPherson as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The prairie stretched around her in rolling swells of grass turned golden by autumn, broken by occasional stands of cottonwood along the creek beds. She let Copper set her own pace, and the mare settled into an easy lope that ate up the miles. The ranch was quiet when she arrived near dusk. It was not much a small log house her father had built when he first claimed the land, a barn that leaned slightly to the south, a set of corrals, and a scattering of outbuildings. They ran about 100 head of cattle and a small remuda of horses on land that stretched along a bend in the Platte. It was enough to survive on, barely, if the weather cooperated and the cattle stayed healthy and the bank did not call in its loans. Her father was sitting on the porch, his crippled legs stretched out in front of him. Daniel Ramsey was 52, gray-bearded and weathered, with the same dark blonde hair Kate had inherited, though his had gone mostly to silver. He watched her ride up and dismount, and she saw the question in his eyes. "They would not pay," she said without preamble. Morrison said the authorization was not filed properly. Her father's face darkened. "Those sons of," he caught himself, shook his head. "I told you, Katie, I told you they would find a way to weasel out of it. You did." She climbed the porch steps and sat down beside him. "But I found other work. Good work. A rancher named Nathan Rourke needs a scout to take a herd to Cheyenne. He is paying $500. Daniel turned to look at her, his eyebrows climbing. $500 for a 3-week drive. He knows what the Army did. He said he is paying me double what I earned because it is the right thing to do." Kate pulled off her hat, ran a hand through her hair. "I think he meant it, Pa. He seems like a straight shooter." "Nathan Rourke," her father said thoughtfully. "I have heard that name. He has a spread up along the Dismal River, does not he? Built it up from nothing by all accounts. Fair dealer, pays his debts, does not truck with rustlers." He nodded slowly. "If it is the same man, you could do worse. We leave in 3 days." Her father was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkening prairie. Finally, he said, "You be careful, Katie. 3 weeks on the trail with a crew of drovers, even good ones, that can be hard for a woman." "I have been handling myself on the trail since I was 16, Pa. I know, but still." "You are my daughter and I worry." Kate leaned over and kissed his weathered cheek. "I will be fine, and when I get back, we will have the money to pay off the bank and get supplies for winter. We will be all right." The door opened and Mary came out, wiping her hands on her apron. She was 18, with the same Ramsey coloring but a rounder face and a more delicate build than Kate. She had their mother's gentle nature, preferring the garden and the house to the range work that Kate loved. "You are back," Mary said, smiling. Then she saw Kate's expression and the smile faded. "They did not pay you, no, but I found other work." Kate explained about Nathan and the drive and watched her sister's face brighten with relief. $500. "Oh, Kate, that is wonderful. We will be able to keep the ranch and maybe even," she broke off, biting her lip. "Maybe even what?" Kate asked. "Maybe even buy some laying hens and seeds for a bigger garden in the spring. If we had more chickens, I could sell eggs in town. It would be a little extra income." Kate smiled at her sister's modest dreams. Mary had never asked for much. She had been only 7 when their mother died, and she had grown up taking on the household responsibilities without complaint, cooking and cleaning and mending while Kate rode the range with their father. Now she deserved a chance to build something of her own. "We will get you those chickens," Kate promised, "and whatever seeds you want." The next 3 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Kate went through her gear, checking her saddle and tack, cleaning her rifle and pistol, packing the supplies she would need for the trail. She rode into North Platte to buy coffee and jerky, and to let the general store owner know where she would be in case any messages came for her family. North Platte was a railroad town, raw and bustling, grown up around the Union Pacific tracks that had been laid nearly a decade before. It had the usual collection of saloons, stores, a hotel, and the constant traffic of people moving west. On the morning of October 20th, Kate rose before dawn. She dressed in her trail clothes, a split riding skirt, a cotton shirt, her buckskin jacket, and sturdy boots. She braided her hair and covered it with her hat, checked her weapons one final time, and went out to saddle Copper. The air was cold and smelled of frost. Her father was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Mary was cooking breakfast, and the smell of bacon and biscuits filled the house. "Eat something before you go," Mary insisted, setting a plate in front of Kate. "It is a long ride to the dismal river." Kate ate, though her stomach was tight with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. This was not her first trail drive, but it was the first time she would be working for someone who had shown her such immediate respect and generosity. She did not want to let Nathan Rourke down. When she finished eating, she hugged Mary and shook her father's hand. "Take care of each other," she said. "I will be back before Thanksgiving." "You take care of yourself," her father replied. "And Katie, make sure this Nathan fellow treats you proper. If he does not, you come straight home." "I will, Pa." The ride north took most of the morning. Kate followed the Platte for a ways, then cut cross-country through rolling grassland interrupted by ravines and creek beds lined with cottonwoods. The sun climbed into a sky streaked with mare's tail clouds, and a steady wind blew from the northwest, carrying the promise of colder weather to come. Copper moved steadily beneath her, ears pricked forward, enjoying the work. She found Nathan's ranch shortly after noon. It was more substantial than her family's place, a good-sized house with a stone chimney, a large barn, several outbuildings, and an extensive system of corrals and pens. Cattle dotted the surrounding grassland, and she could see men working near the corrals, separating out animals and moving them into a holding pen. Nathan spotted her when she was still a quarter-mile out and rode to meet her. He was mounted on a tall bay gelding, and he sat his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life in the saddle. "You made good time," he said by way of greeting. "We are just finishing the gather. Come on up to the house and I will introduce you to the crew." The 6 drovers were gathered near the barn, drinking coffee and checking their gear. Nathan introduced them one by one. Tom Higgins, the oldest at 45, a grizzled veteran of a dozen trail drives; Paul Winter, a quiet man in his mid-30s; Jake Morrison and Ben Hayes, both in their early 20s and eager to prove themselves; and 2 brothers, Sam and Charlie Foster, who looked to be in their late 20s. They were all sunburned, work-hardened men with the lean build of cowboys, and they studied Kate with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. "This is Kate Ramsey," Nathan said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "She is our scout for this drive. She knows this country better than any of us, and she will be calling the route and the pace. What she says goes. Anyone have a problem with that?" There was a moment of silence. Tom Higgins spat tobacco juice into the dirt, wiped his mouth, and said, "I heard of your pa, Miss Ramsey." Daniel Ramsey scouted for the Army back in the 60s. If you are half the tracker he was, we will be in good hands. "I appreciate that," Kate said. "I will do my best to get us to Cheyenne on time and in one piece." Ben Hayes, one of the younger men, looked like he wanted to say something, but Jake Morrison elbowed him in the ribs and he subsided. The Foster brothers nodded, and Paul Winter gave her a brief smile. "All right then," Nathan said. "We move out at first light tomorrow. Get your rest tonight, because once we start we will be pushing hard. Kate, you will bunk in the house. There is a spare room." He showed her to the house, which was neat and well-maintained, with furniture that looked handmade but solid. The spare room was small but comfortable, with a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the corrals. Kate set down her saddlebags and turned to find Nathan watching her from the doorway. "Thank you for this," she said. "For the work, and for paying me fairly. It means more than you might realize. You earned it before I ever offered it to you," Nathan said. "The Army should have paid you. Since they did not, I am glad I can." He paused, then added, "I looked into it a bit after we talked, asked around at the fort. The soldiers I spoke to said you were the best scout they ever worked with. They said you have a gift." Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I just pay attention, that is all. My father taught me to read the land. It is more than that, but either way I am grateful to have you with us." Nathan tipped his hat to her. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." That evening she ate dinner with Nathan and the crew in the large kitchen. The conversation was easy, focused on the drive ahead, the route they would take, the condition of the herd. Kate contributed what she knew about the terrain between the Dismal River and the Wyoming border, the water sources, the potential trouble spots. The men listened, and if some of them were still uncertain about taking orders from a woman, they at least had the sense to keep it to themselves. After dinner, Nathan walked her out to the porch. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered like salt across the black dome of the sky. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the darkness. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said finally. "Sure." "Why did you agree to scout for the Army in the first place? It is dangerous work, and from what I heard, the campaign was not exactly popular. A lot of the regular scouts wanted nothing to do with it." Kate considered her answer. "My father cannot scout anymore, not with his leg. And we needed the money. The ranch has been struggling and the bank was making noises about calling in the loan. I figured 3 months of work would give us enough to get clear and have a cushion for the winter." She shook her head. "I did not expect them to cheat me. I am sorry that happened. But I am glad it brought you here, if that does not sound too selfish." She looked at him in the starlight. His face was half in shadow, but she could see the sincerity in his expression. "It does not sound selfish, and I am glad too." They stood there a moment longer, and Kate felt something shift between them, some recognition that went beyond the simple transaction of employer and employee. Then Nathan cleared his throat and said, "I should let you get your rest. Big day tomorrow." "Good night, Nathan." "Good night, Kate." She went inside and lay in the narrow bed, listening to the wind outside and the distant lowing of cattle. Her thoughts were a jumble, the relief of having the money she needed, the anticipation of the trail ahead, and underneath it all, a growing awareness of Nathan Rourke that had nothing to do with business. She told herself not to be foolish. He was her employer, nothing more, and she needed to focus on the job at hand. But as she drifted toward sleep, she could not help remembering the way he had looked at her on the porch, or the warmth in his voice when he said he was glad she had come. The drive began at dawn. 800 head of cattle were a substantial herd, enough to require constant attention, but not so many that they could not be managed by a crew of 7 plus Nathan and Kate. The plan was to follow the North Platte westward until they reached the higher country, then swing northwest toward the Wyoming border and follow the trail to Cheyenne. It was not the most direct route, but it would keep them near water and avoid the worst of the broken country. Kate rode ahead, scouting the trail and checking for obstacles. Nathan had given her a good horse for the work, a rangy dun gelding named Scout with stamina and intelligence. She ranged a mile or two ahead of the herd, reading the land, marking the easiest crossings and the best camp sites. Behind her, she could hear the bawling of cattle and the shouts of the drovers keeping them moving. The first few days went smoothly. The weather held clear and cold, perfect for driving. The herd settled into a rhythm, covering 12 to 15 miles a day. Kate found good water each evening and located sheltered spots for the night camps. The crew, initially reserved, began to warm to her as they saw her competence. Even Ben Hayes, who had been the most skeptical, admitted that she knew what she was doing. Nathan rode up to join her on the 4th day out. They were following a broad valley with the river meandering silver to their left and low bluffs rising to the right. The grass was still good here, though it had been grazed heavily by buffalo and wild horses earlier in the season. "How does it look ahead?" Nathan asked. "Clear for another 2 days as long as we stay in the valley. After that, we will need to decide whether to keep following the river or cut northwest more directly. The river route is easier, but it adds miles. The direct route is faster but rougher." "What do you recommend?" Kate had been thinking about this. "The weather is good now, but it could change fast this time of year. If we get snow in the high country, we will be stuck. I say we take the direct route, save the time while we can." Nathan nodded. "I trust your judgment." "We will do it your way." They rode in silence for a while, watching the land. Kate found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her, the easy way he sat his horse, the competent hands on the reins. She had worked with men all her life, her father, other scouts, soldiers, but there was something different about Nathan. He did not treat her as a curiosity or a novelty. He did not condescend or make jokes about her being a woman. He simply treated her as a professional, an equal, and that respect kindled something warm in her chest. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said, echoing his question from the night before the drive began. "You seem to be making a habit of that," Kate said, but she was smiling. "Fair enough." "I was wondering, what will you do after this drive?" "Go back to the ranch and help your father." "That is the plan. We need to build up our herd, get through the winter. Maybe in the spring I will hire out as a scout again, but only if the money is right and the work is honest." "You do not want to ranch full-time," Kate thought about it. "I love the ranch and I love working the land, but I also love the trail, the open country, the challenge of reading the signs and finding the way. My father used to say that scouting was as much art as science, and I think he was right. It is like solving a puzzle, figuring out how all the pieces fit together." "You are good at it," Nathan said. "The best I have seen, and I have worked with some talented people over the years. Thank you, that means a lot coming from you." "Why from me?" "Because you know the land yourself. You are not just some greenhorn who needs his hand held. You understand what goes into this work." Nathan looked pleased. "I appreciate that, and for what it is worth, I think you would make a fine rancher too. You have the instinct for it, the ability to read animals and land. If you ever wanted to do more with your place, I would be happy to give you advice, or help if you needed it." Kate felt that warmth again, spreading through her like whiskey on a cold night. "I will keep that in mind." They reached the point where the valley began to narrow on the seventh day. Kate had scouted ahead and found the route she wanted to take, a series of long ridges and broad draws that would lead them northwest toward the higher plains. It was rougher country, but not impossible for cattle, and it would save them 3 or 4 days over the river route. She explained the plan to Nathan and the crew that evening in camp. Tom Higgins looked doubtful, and Paul Winter asked several questions about water, but in the end they agreed to try it. They broke camp early the next morning and began the climb out of the valley. The going was slower here. The cattle had to be pushed up the long slopes and kept bunched in the draws. Kate rode constantly, checking the route ahead, making sure there were no cut banks or washouts that would trap the herd. Nathan worked beside his men, moving up and down the line, encouraging the animals, helping to turn back strays. Kate found herself watching him when she had the chance, admiring his strength and skill, the way he seemed to know instinctively where he was needed most. They made camp that night on a high plateau with a view that stretched for miles in every direction. The sunset was spectacular, painting the western sky in shades of orange and crimson and purple. Kate stood at the edge of camp, watching the light fade, and Nathan came to stand beside her. "Beautiful," he said quietly. "It is. I never get tired of this, the bigness of it all. It makes everything else seem small." "I know what you mean. When I first came out here after the war, I felt like I could finally breathe again. All that open space, no one telling you what to do or where to go, just you and the land." "Where were you during the war?" Kate asked. She had been curious but had not wanted to pry. "Missouri mostly, then Kansas. I was with the cavalry, fighting raiders and bushwhackers. It was ugly work, and I do not talk about it much. When it ended, I just wanted to get away from it all, start fresh. I worked as a drover for a few years, saved my money and bought a small herd, built it up from there. You have done well for yourself. I have been lucky. And I have worked hard, but luck counts for a lot." He turned to look at her. "What about you? What was it like growing up out here?" Kate told him about her childhood, about learning to ride and shoot and track from her father, about her mother's death and the way it had changed everything, about Mary and the ranch, and the constant struggle to make ends meet. Nathan listened without interrupting, his attention complete and unwavering. "It must have been hard, taking on so much responsibility so young," he said when she finished. "It was what needed to be done. My father could not do it alone, and Mary was too young, so I did it." She shrugged. "I do not regret it. It made me who I am." "And who you are is pretty remarkable," Nathan said softly. Kate felt her heart skip. She looked at him, and in the fading light, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch warmth and admiration, and something deeper, something that called to the lonely places inside her that she usually kept well guarded. "Nathan," she said, but she did not know what else to say. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "That was forward of me. You are working for me, and I should not know," Kate interrupted. "Do not apologize. I am glad you said it." They looked at each other for a long moment, and Kate felt the air between them charged with possibility. Then one of the drovers called for Nathan, asking about the watch schedule, and the moment broke. "I should go," Nathan said, but he did not move immediately. "Kate, I want you to know this job, hiring you, it was not about anything except needing a good scout. But I would be lying if I said I had not been hoping to get to know you better. And now that I am, I find myself wishing this drive could last a little longer." "I wish that too," Kate admitted. Nathan smiled, that transforming smile that reached his eyes. "Then maybe when we get to Cheyenne, before you head home, you would let me buy you dinner. A proper dinner in a restaurant, not trail food. I would like that very much." The next week was the hardest of the drive. The terrain grew more rugged as they climbed toward the high plains, and the weather began to turn. Cold winds blew down from the north, and clouds gathered on the horizon. Kate pushed them hard, wanting to cover as much ground as possible before the weather broke. The cattle were tiring, and the men were saddle-sore and short-tempered, but they kept moving. Kate and Nathan spent as much time together as the work allowed. He would ride up to join her when she was scouting, and they would talk about everything and nothing: their lives, their dreams, their fears. Kate found herself opening up to him in ways she had not with anyone else. There was something about Nathan that made her feel safe, understood. He listened when she talked about the frustration of fighting to keep the ranch, about the way people dismissed her because she was a woman, about the loneliness of being strong all the time because there was no one else to be strong for her. And Nathan shared his own struggles: the challenge of building a ranch from nothing, the isolation of his life, the way he sometimes wondered if he was meant to spend his whole life alone on the prairie. He told her about his family, long dead or scattered, about the war that still haunted his dreams, about the hope he had that maybe, someday, he could build something lasting. "I always thought I would have a family," he said one evening as they watched the herd settle for the night. "A wife, children, a home full of life and laughter. But the years keep passing and it has not happened. I have been starting to think maybe it is not in the cards for me." "Maybe you have just not met the right person yet," Kate said quietly. "Maybe," he looked at her. "Or maybe I have, and I am just trying to work up the courage to say so." Kate's pulse hammered in her throat. "Nathan, I know we have not known each other long," he said quickly. "And I know this probably is not the time or place, but Kate, I have never met anyone like you. You are brave and skilled and smart, and you do not back down from anything. You are also kind and thoughtful and beautiful, and I find myself thinking about you all the time, even when I should be focused on the cattle or the trail or anything else." Kate could not breathe. She had been falling for him too, she realized, falling hard and fast in a way that should have scared her but instead felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I think about you too," she said, "all the time. And I do not know what I want exactly, but I know I do not want this to end when we get to Cheyenne. I do not want to just take my pay and ride away and never see you again." "Then do not," Nathan said. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and rough against hers. "Kate, I know we are still getting to know each other, but I feel like I have been waiting my whole life to meet you. I do not want to let you go." "I do not want to go," Kate whispered. Nathan stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Can I kiss you, please?" He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Kate did not want to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet, and everything she had been dreaming about for days. She kissed him back, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart pounding as hard as her own. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "You have no idea how long I have been wanting to do that." "I think I might have some idea," Kate said, and felt him laugh. The weather broke 2 days later. They woke to a sky heavy with clouds and a wind that cut through their clothing like knives. By mid-morning, snow was falling, big wet flakes that melted when they hit the ground but signaled worse to come. Kate knew they were in trouble. They were still 50 miles from Cheyenne, in exposed country with little shelter. If the snow got heavy, they could lose cattle to the cold, or worse, the herd could stampede. She rode back to consult with Nathan. "We need to find shelter," she said urgently. "There is a canyon about 5 miles northwest of here, if I am remembering right. It is not perfect, but it will give us some protection from the wind. We can hold the herd there until the storm passes." "How sure are you about this canyon?" "Fairly sure. My father and I camped there once years ago. It had good grass and water and high walls that cut the wind. Nathan made the decision instantly. "We will trust you. Tom, Paul, get up here. We are changing course." They pushed the herd hard, driving them northwest through the thickening snow. The cattle were restless, sensing the storm, and it took all the skill of the drovers to keep them moving in the right direction. Kate rode ahead, straining to see through the snow, praying that her memory was correct. And then, like a miracle, the land dropped away in front of her, and she saw the canyon, a broad, deep cut in the plains with steep walls and a creek running through the bottom. Relief flooded through her so strongly that she felt dizzy. She rode back and led them in. It took another hour to get all the cattle down into the canyon and settled, but once they were there, the difference was immediate. The walls blocked the worst of the wind, and there was grass and water for the animals. The men quickly set up a rough camp, stringing tarps between the canyon walls for shelter. The storm raged for 2 days. Snow piled up on the plains above them, but in the canyon, they were relatively protected. The cattle huddled together for warmth, and the men took turns keeping watch. Kate and Nathan spent most of their time together, checking on the herd, making sure no animals had wandered off or gotten into trouble. At night, they sat close to the fire, shoulders touching, talking in low voices while the wind howled above them. On the second night, Nathan said, "You saved us, you know. If we had been caught out in the open, we would have lost half the herd, maybe more. I was just doing my job. It was more than that. You took a risk, changing course based on a memory from years ago. If you had been wrong, we would have been in even worse trouble, but you trusted your instinct and you were right. My father always said that scouting is as much about intuition as knowledge. You have to trust what you feel as much as what you see." "Well, I trust you," Nathan said. "Completely." Kate leaned her head on his shoulder, tired and cold but content. "I trust you too." When the storm finally cleared on the third day, the world was transformed. The plains were white as far as the eye could see, and the sun reflecting off the snow was blindingly bright. But the sky was blue and the wind had dropped, and Kate knew they had caught a break. They pushed out of the canyon and drove the herd west. The going was slow through the snow, but the cattle were rested and the men were in good spirits, buoyed by their survival of the storm. Kate navigated by landmarks half hidden under the white, but her sense of direction held true. They reached the outskirts of Cheyenne on the 21st day of the drive, 4 days ahead of Nathan's most pessimistic estimate. The town sprawled across the flat land, a jumble of buildings and corrals and stockyards that had grown up around the Union Pacific Railroad. Nathan led the herd to the stockyards and negotiated the sale with the buyer who had been expecting them. The price was good, better than Nathan had hoped, and he was smiling when he came back to where Kate waited with the crew. "We did it," he said, shaking hands with each of the drovers in turn. "You men did fine work, and I will make sure you are paid accordingly. Tom, if you will see to settling the boys, I need to take care of some business with Kate." Tom nodded, grinning. "We will be at the saloon when you are ready, boss." Nathan led Kate to the bank, where he arranged to have the money transferred. Then he walked her to the hotel where she had stabled Copper and Scout, and stopped in the lobby. "I owe you $500, he said, pulling out a bank draft. "But I am also giving you a bonus of another $200, because you saved the herd when that storm hit." "You earned every penny of this, Kate." Kate looked at the draft, her eyes stinging. $700, more money than she had ever held in her life, enough to save the ranch, buy Mary her chickens, and put away a stake for the future. "Nathan, the bonus is too much." "It is not enough," he said firmly. "Kate, you are the best scout I have ever worked with, and more than that, you are," he broke off, looking around at the busy hotel lobby. Can we go somewhere more private? They went up to her room, a small but clean space with a window overlooking the street. Kate set the bank draft on the dresser and turned to face Nathan. What did you want to say? He took off his hat, turned it in his hands. I want to say that these past 3 weeks have been the best of my life, not because the drive went well, though that is part of it, but because I got to spend every day with you, learning about you, falling for you. Kate, I am in love with you. I know it is fast and maybe I am a fool for saying it, but I cannot keep it in any longer. I love you. Kate felt tears spill over, running hot down her cold cheeks. I love you too. I have been so afraid to say it, because I did not know if you felt the same, but Nathan, I love you. I think I started falling for you that first day at Fort McPherson, when you said you would pay me double because it was the right thing to do. Nathan closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her, deep and hungry, and Kate kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Marry me, Nathan said urgently. I know it is sudden, but Kate, I do not want to waste any more time. I have been alone for so long, and now that I have found you, I do not want to let you go. Marry me, and we will build a life together. We can combine our ranches, make something bigger and better than either of us could alone. We can work side by side, raise a family, grow old together. Please, Kate, say yes. Kate's heart was so full she thought it might burst. Yes. Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. He kissed her again, and this time there was promise in it, a future unfolding before them like the wide prairie sky. They were married 2 days later in Cheyenne, in a simple ceremony at the courthouse with Tom Higgins and 2 of the other drovers as witnesses. Kate wore the best dress she had brought with her, and Nathan wore a new suit he bought for the occasion. When the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her so thoroughly that Tom hooted, and the justice cleared his throat in embarrassment. They sent a telegram to her family, knowing that a letter would take too long. Kate imagined her father's face when he got the news, the surprise and then the slow smile as he realized his daughter had found happiness. She thought of Mary, who would be thrilled and would probably already be planning a celebration for when they got home. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, and Kate discovered that being with Nathan was even better than she had imagined. He was gentle and passionate, attentive to her needs, and when she fell asleep in his arms, she felt more content than she had in her entire life. They left Cheyenne 3 days later, heading back to Nebraska together. Nathan had sold his herd but kept his horses, and they rode side by side across the snowy plains, talking and laughing and making plans for their future. They stopped at Kate's family ranch first, and Daniel and Mary came out to greet them, their faces lighting up with joy when Kate introduced Nathan as her husband. "You work fast, girl," her father said, but he was grinning as he shook Nathan's hand. "Welcome to the family, son. You treat my daughter right, or you will have me to answer to." "I will treat her like the treasure she is, sir," Nathan said seriously. "You have my word." Mary threw her arms around Kate, crying happy tears. "I am so glad for you," she whispered. "You deserve this, all of this." They spent 2 days at the ranch, helping with chores and making plans. Nathan assessed the land and the herd with a practiced eye, and he and Daniel talked for hours about how to improve the operation. It was decided that they would keep the Ramsey ranch running as a satellite of Nathan's larger spread, with Daniel and Mary staying on to manage it. Nathan would supply additional breeding stock, and the 2 ranches would function as a partnership. "This way, your father keeps his independence and his home," Nathan explained to Kate. "But he also gets the support he needs, and Mary can have her chickens and her garden and whatever else she wants. It will be good for all of us." Kate loved him even more for his generosity. He was not trying to take over or push her family aside. He was finding a way to honor what they had built while making it stronger. They traveled to Nathan's ranch next, and Kate saw the place where she would now live with fresh eyes. It was a good ranch, well-maintained and productive, with a solid house and excellent land. The hands greeted Nathan warmly and accepted Kate without hesitation, especially after Tom spread the word about how she had saved the herd during the storm. Over the next few months, Kate settled into her new life. She helped Nathan run the ranch, using her knowledge of the land and her tracking skills to locate strays and find the best grazing. She learned the rhythms of his operation, and he learned from her as well. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths. Winter passed, cold and hard, but Kate was warm in the house Nathan had built and in the arms of the man she loved. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, talking about the ranch, about the coming spring, about the family they wanted to build. Nathan had dreams of expanding the herd, of building a legacy that would last for generations. Kate dreamed of riding the open country with her children, teaching them to read the land the way her father had taught her. Spring came, and with it, the hard work of calving season. Kate was up before dawn every day, checking on the cows, helping with difficult births, making sure the newborns were healthy. Nathan worked beside her, and often they would finish the day exhausted and filthy but satisfied. It was during the spring roundup that Kate realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited until she was certain before telling Nathan. When she finally said the words, his face transformed with joy. "A baby. Kate, are you sure?" "I am sure. We are going to have a child, Nathan. In the fall, probably October." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "You should not be working so hard, not in your condition." "I am pregnant, not broken," Kate said, but she was smiling. "I can still do my job." "We are going to hire more help," Nathan declared. "I do not want you overdoing it." They did hire more help, and Kate did take it a bit easier as the summer progressed and her belly grew. But she still rode every day, checking the far pastures and keeping an eye on the range. She would not give up the work she loved, even as her body changed to accommodate the life growing inside her. She rode to visit her family regularly, and Mary fussed over her, making sure she was eating enough and resting properly. Daniel seemed both proud and concerned, torn between his joy at becoming a grandfather and his worry for his daughter's health. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Pa," Kate assured him. "I will be fine." And she was fine. When her labor started in early October, Nathan rode like fury to fetch the midwife from North Platte. Kate labored through the night, with Mary and the midwife attending her and Nathan pacing downstairs. When dawn broke, she delivered a healthy baby boy with a strong cry and dark hair like his father. Nathan came upstairs to find her propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing with the baby in her arms. He sat down carefully beside her, looking at his son with wonder. "He is perfect," Nathan said hoarsely. "You are perfect. Kate, I love you so much." "I love you too. Do you want to hold him?" Nathan took the baby with the careful reverence of someone holding something infinitely precious. The baby opened his eyes, which were a dark blue that might turn to gray-green like his father's, and looked up at Nathan as if taking his measure. "Hello, son," Nathan said softly. "I am your father and this is your mother, and we are going to give you the best life we can. We are going to teach you about the land and the cattle, and what it means to work hard and treat people fairly. We are going to love you every day of your life." They named him David after Kate's grandfather, and he became the center of their world. Kate took to motherhood with the same competence she brought to everything else, though she admitted to Nathan that the sleepless nights were harder than any trail drive. Nathan was a devoted father, tending to the baby when Kate needed rest, marveling at every small milestone. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, growing steadily as Nathan and Kate worked together to build their operation. They added onto the house, creating more room for their growing family. 2 years after David was born, Kate gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had Kate's dark blonde hair and Nathan's smile, and she was fearless from the start. Daniel grew older but remained active, taking pride in his grandchildren and in the success of the combined ranch operations. Mary eventually married a young farmer from North Platte, and she and her husband built a house on the Ramsey land, continuing to help with the ranch while also working their own fields. Kate never stopped scouting entirely. When the children were old enough, she would take short trips, hiring out to guide settlers or help track rustlers. Nathan supported her work, understanding that it was part of who she was. And sometimes they would go together, leaving the children with Mary or the ranch hands, riding out into the open country and remembering those early days when they had fallen in love on the trail to Cheyenne. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked her once, years later. They were sitting on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the prairie. David was 16 now, tall and capable, already running his own string of cattle. Grace was 14, wild and beautiful, the best rider on the ranch. Inside, the younger children Samuel, who was 10, and the twins Emma and Joseph, who were 7, were finishing their evening chores. "Regret what?" Kate asked, though she knew what he meant. "Giving up the life you had before, the freedom of scouting, of being on your own. Sometimes I worry that you feel trapped, tied down by me and the children and the ranch." Kate took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. They were older now, both in their early 40s, with lines on their faces and gray threading through their hair. But when she looked at Nathan, she still saw the man who had offered to pay her double what she had earned, the man who had recognized her worth when others had dismissed her. "I do not regret a single day," she said firmly. "Nathan, you gave me everything I ever wanted, even things I did not know I wanted. You gave me a partnership, a family, a home. You gave me respect and love and a future. How could I regret that?" "You saved my life too," Nathan said. "Not just on that drive, though you did that too. But you saved me from loneliness, from a half-life spent working and existing but never really living. You made me whole, Kate. We made each other whole." They sat in companionable silence as the sky blazed with color, as it had that night on the trail so many years ago. Kate thought about the journey that had brought her here, the frustration and betrayal at Fort McPherson, the desperate need for money that had made her take Nathan's offer, the slow unfolding of love on the trail to Cheyenne. She thought about the storm that had nearly killed them all, and the way Nathan had trusted her to lead them to safety. She thought about their wedding, their children, the decades of work and love, and building something lasting together. The Army had refused to pay her what she was owed, had dismissed her work and her worth. But Nathan had seen her value immediately, had offered to pay her double, and in doing so had set in motion a chain of events that had led to this life, this love, this family. It was not the path she had imagined for herself, but it was better than anything she could have dreamed. Inside the house, she could hear the children laughing, and she smiled. Grace came out onto the porch, her blonde braids swinging. "Mama, Papa, are you coming in for supper?" "Samuel says he is starving and might waste away to nothing if he does not eat soon." Nathan laughed. "We had better go in then. Cannot have the boy wasting away." They rose and went inside together, Kate's hand still in Nathan's. The house smelled of bread and stew, and the table was set for 7. This was her life now, the ranch, the children, the man she loved. It was not always easy, but it was good and true and hers. After supper, when the children were in bed, Kate and Nathan stood outside under the stars. The night was clear and cold, the way it had been on that drive so long ago. "Do you remember the first time we talked, really talked?" Nathan asked. "It was up on that plateau watching the sunset. You said the bigness of the land made everything else seem small." "I remember. I think about that sometimes. How small we are, how brief our lives are in the grand scheme of things. But then I look at what we have built, this ranch, our children, the life we have made together, and I think maybe it is not so small after all. Maybe what we have done matters." "It matters," Kate said. "We took two separate lives that were struggling and lonely, and we built something strong and lasting. We raised children who will carry on after we are gone. We helped your hands and my family. We made this corner of the world a better place. That matters, Nathan. It all matters." He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and the prairie stretched away into darkness. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling, working, loving, building their own lives. Kate hoped they would find the same happiness she had found, the same sense of belonging and purpose. She had been a scout, a guide through dangerous country. She had learned to raid the land, to find the safe paths and the hidden water sources. But the most important trail she had ever followed was the one that had led her to Nathan and the life they had built together. The army had tried to cheat her, had refused to pay her what she had earned. But Nathan had made up for that betrayal and so much more. He had paid her double what she was owed, and in doing so had given her not just money but hope, respect, love, and a future beyond anything she could have imagined. As they stood together under the stars, Kate thought about all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. If the army had paid her as promised, she would have gone home to her father's ranch and probably never met Nathan. She would have spent her life struggling to make ends meet, alone except for her family, never knowing what she was missing. The betrayal had hurt at the time, had made her angry and bitter. But it had also opened a door to a future she had not known existed. She did not believe that everything happened for a reason. Life was too complicated and painful for such simple explanations. But she did believe that good could come from bad, that disappointment could lead to unexpected joy. The army's refusal to pay her had been unjust, but it had led her to Nathan, and that made all the difference. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing of seasons and the growth of their children. David took over more and more of the ranch operations as Nathan began to slow down. Grace married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man who treated her well, and they built a house on the edge of the property. Samuel showed a talent for breeding horses and began developing a remuda that became known throughout the territory. The twins, Emma and Joseph, were inseparable and worked together to manage the books and the business side of the ranch. Kate's father passed away when she was 48, dying peacefully in his sleep. They buried him on a hill overlooking the Platte, and Kate stood by his grave with Nathan's arm around her, remembering all the things her father had taught her. He had given her the skills that had saved her family, that had brought her to Nathan, that had allowed her to build this life. She mourned him deeply, but she also felt grateful for the time they had together. Mary's children grew and married and had children of their own, and the extended family gathered regularly for dinners and celebrations. The ranch continued to prosper, weathering droughts and hard winters, growing stronger with each generation. Kate and Nathan's grandchildren learned to ride and rope and read the land, carrying on the traditions that had been passed down to them. When Kate was 53, she and Nathan took a trip back to Cheyenne. following the same route they had taken on that fateful cattle drive so many years before. The land had changed. There were more ranches now, more towns, the railroad reaching into places that had been empty prairie when they first met. But the bones of the country were the same, the rolling plains and the distant mountains, the vast sky and the wind that never stopped blowing. They found the canyon where they had sheltered from the storm, and they rode down into it together. The creek still ran clear, and the grass was still good, and Kate felt a rush of emotion remembering the fear and the hope of that time. "We almost lost everything here," she said. "The herd, the money, maybe even our lives. But we did not lose it," Nathan said. "We survived because you knew what to do, because you trusted your instincts. You saved us, Kate. You have been saving us ever since." They camped in the canyon that night, just the two of them, sleeping under the stars the way they had on the drive. In the morning, they rode on to Cheyenne, where they visited the courthouse where they had been married. The building was the same, though the justice of the peace who had married them was long retired. They stood in the lobby, holding hands, remembering that day. "Would you do it again?" Nathan asked. "If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you still say yes?" "In a heartbeat," Kate said. "Every single time I would say yes." They returned to the ranch renewed, ready to face whatever years remained to them. Nathan's health began to decline when he was 60, his joints stiffening with age and old injuries. He could no longer ride all day or work alongside his sons, and he chafed at the limitations of his aging body. But he still rose every morning, still made the rounds of the ranch on a gentle mare, still offered advice and wisdom to David and the others. Kate remained active longer, still taking short scouting trips when hired, still riding out to check the far reaches of the ranch. Her hair had gone completely gray, and her face was weathered by decades of sun and wind, but her eyes remained sharp and her instincts as keen as ever. She became something of a legend in the territory, the woman scout who had guided the army, and then married the rancher who had paid her double what she was owed. Young women would sometimes come to the ranch, asking for her advice, wanting to know how she had managed to build the life she had in a world that did not always welcome independent women. Kate told them the truth, that it had been hard, that she had faced rejection and dismissal, that there had been times when she had wanted to give up. But she had persevered, had trusted in her own abilities, and had found a partner who valued her for who she was. She told them that the right person would not try to diminish them or change them, but would celebrate their strength and stand beside them as an equal. Nathan died in his sleep at the age of 68, with Kate beside him. He had been ill for several weeks, his heart finally wearing out after a lifetime of hard work. Kate held his hand as he slipped away, whispering that she loved him, that she would see him again someday, that he had given her the best life she could have imagined. After he was gone, she sat with him for a long time, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to the man who had changed everything. They buried him on the same hill where her father lay, with a view that stretched to the horizon. The whole family gathered, along with friends and neighbors from miles around. David spoke at the service, talking about his father's integrity and generosity, his love for his family and his land. Grace sang a hymn in a voice that broke with emotion. Kate stood dry-eyed through it all, her grief too deep for tears, supported by her children and grandchildren. In the months after Nathan's death, Kate found her footing again. She continued to live in the house they had shared, surrounded by memories of their life together. She rode every day, checking on the cattle and the land, maintaining the connection to the ranch that had been so important to both of them. David ran the operation now, but he consulted with her on every major decision, valuing her experience and her wisdom. Kate lived for another 12 years, watching her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren be born. She told stories about the old days, about scouting for the army and the cattle drive to Cheyenne, and the storm that had nearly killed them all. She talked about Nathan, keeping his memory alive for the generations that had never known him. And she continued to ride, to raid the land, to be the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. She died at the age of 80, peacefully in her sleep, just as Nathan had. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with her husband, a slight smile on her weathered face. They buried her beside Nathan, reuniting them after years apart. At her funeral, David spoke about his mother's strength and courage, about the way she had built a life from nothing and had taught her children to do the same. Grace talked about her mother's love, the fierce protectiveness and the gentle guidance that had shaped all of them. The grandchildren shared stories, and the great-grandchildren listened wide-eyed, learning about the woman who had been the foundation of their family. The ranch continued after Kate was gone, passed down through the generations just as she and Nathan had hoped. The family grew and spread, but they remained connected to the land that had been so important to their ancestors. And sometimes, when the wind blew across the prairie and the sun set in a blaze of color, the people working the ranch would pause and remember the woman scout and the cowboy who had built it all, who had turned betrayal and hardship into love and legacy. The story of Kate and Nathan became part of the family lore, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. It was a story about injustice and integrity, about a woman who had been denied what she had earned, and a man who had paid her double because it was the right thing to do. It was a story about falling in love on the trail, about building a partnership that lasted a lifetime, about creating something that would endure long after they were gone. And it was a story with a simple truth at its heart, that sometimes, when the world treats you unfairly, the right person will come along and make it right. That love can grow in unexpected places, between people who might never have met if circumstances had been different. That what matters most is not the obstacles you face, but how you overcome them, and who you have beside you when you do. The army had refused to pay Kate Ramsey what she was owed, dismissing her service and her sacrifice. But Nathan Rourke had paid her double, and in doing so had given her not just money but dignity, respect, and love. Together, they had built a life that was worth more than any amount of money, a legacy that would outlast them both. And that, in the end, was the greatest payment of all.